Leduc Smaller Gym. Ben, if you can morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock. I'm just going to give people a couple of minutes to settle in, and then we'll get started. I do want to thank everyone for being here. So if you could finish up your conversations and try to take a seat in the next few minutes, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, yep. Yeah, okay. Hi, Dave. All right, I'm going to start in about a minute, so if you could gather near your seats, please. Thank you. And also, Ben, if you could confirm that you can still hear us in the auditorium, please do.
Test. So, yes, we can hear you, but the speaker mic is not on in the auditorium. I'm speaking from the audience mic.
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
The speaker's mic, my mic. Meeting to order, so please take your seats. Today being November 7th, 2020, at the Westborough High School a little bit after 10 o'clock, the time and place of the warrant that was issued for this special town meeting, I call the special town meeting to order. For extra safety, may I suggest that you rise, but let me say the Pledge of Allegiance on your behalf, and that you follow along in your minds or quietly. So please stand. The flag is toward the back of the gymnasium here, and it's toward the front left of the stage. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Thank you. As I said, this is the November 7th, 2020 special town meeting. I am John Arnold, 251 West Main Street, your elected moderator. We have Wendy Mickle, your elected town clerk, to my right, your left. Because this is the normal October special town meeting that was pushed into November by the selectmen because of the overlap with all the early voting going on. This is the regularly scheduled fall town meeting, so we have no quorum, but I do know that as of a few minutes ago, we had somewhere around high 30s, low 40s of people here. And we also, as I mentioned, have the warrant that was issued by the selectmen and properly posted and properly delivered. So I declare the special town meeting in session. I want to start with quick remarks, but I know there's a few things people watching or even people here may wonder. You may be wondering why this meeting is allowed, given that we're under stricter restrictions now than we had been, especially with public gatherings of 10 people or more. The orders and regulations regarding those gatherings exempt legislative bodies, And here at the town meeting, we are Westborough's legislative body. So thank you for being here and exercising your right as a citizen legislator for today. I also want to point out that as in May, because of the COVID-19 restrictions, we're going to be severely limited as a town in having any sort of public parade or recognition of Veterans Day. But since we're gathered within 4 or 5 days of Veterans Day on Wednesday, the 11th, I wore my poppy in honor of all the veterans, near and far, distant past, present, and in the future. And just want to have us all just take a moment to thank people and have this be one of our public displays to thank all the veterans in the past, present, and future for helping America be what it is today. So just a brief moment of thanks. Thank you. Now, don't want to go things too fast, but I don't want to go too slow. As usual, Board of Selectmen to my right, your left, along with the town manager, town council, and department heads who may be needed. We have the Advisory Finance Committee, 9 people, citizens, representing the interests of the legislative body, whose report you should have. There's sure plenty out there, I know. So have a report, recommendations handy, it'll help you follow along. We also have members of the planning board over here. We have the school committee over to my left, your right. And department heads may you see coming and going, and some are in the other gym. I also want to point out that for some safety and for some comfort and medical reasons, and because we had a large crowd in September, we have a few people, and we have a deputy moderator, and we'll have an assistant town clerk momentarily in the auditorium. And if necessary for the overflow, we have the other gym set up, and we will also have a deputy moderator and an assistant clerk there if necessary. I want to thank Steve Masciarelli, Mark Stockman, the Westborough TV folks, the school staff, especially Steve Ashley and his custodial staff, the Board of Health, and everyone involved in setting up the town, yet another town meeting in unusual and difficult circumstances. But to start things off and to get us practice holding our voting cards, our bylaws require that I nominate deputy moderators who will preside in the event of my absence or disability, and also to preside in the gymnasium and the auditorium as necessary. It's you, the meeting, that makes the selection. I simply nominate them. So I have recruited and nominated Benjamin Gold of 1 Eric Drive and Lisa Blaze-Juski of 2 Treetop Park for this post. They have been briefed. They have served at past town meetings as deputy moderator, and they are ready to serve as needed. So the way we're going to do this is that on votes, we're going to ask you to raise your card if you're in favor. So I've nominated Benjamin Gold and Lisa Blaze-Juski. Will all those in favor of this nomination please raise their voting slip? Okay, anyone opposed? Please raise your voting slip if you're opposed. I see no opposition in the large gym. Mr. Gold, is there any opposition in the auditorium?
There is not.
Okay, and I believe we have no overflow voters in the other gymnasium yet, so I'll declare that a unanimous vote. Mr. Gold and Ms. Blaze-Juski, could you please rise and raise your right hand if you wish? Do you solemnly swear that having been elected deputy moderator, that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of this office, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gold, and thank you, Ms. Blaze-Juski. I thank you for your willingness to serve. I have gotten no requests for non-voters to be here. Are there any non-voters who are here who wish to, do you wish to speak, or are you just here to watch? Okay, just you don't have a voting card. Rather than subjugate you to the empty room where I put the non-voter section, if you could just stay toward the back and please refrain from discussing or voting. But thank you for being here and taking time out of your day to see how our process works. Let's see, I'm going to go over this as quickly as I can. So as I said, this is the town meeting, Westborough's legislative body. If you weren't here for June or September, you know there's a lot of differences. So I want to thank everyone. I'm going to skip over lots of the normal pleasantries, but there are some key things I want to go over. First of all is that if you ever have a question of what's going on, because I'm going to skip over lots of the details of procedure, simply raise your voting slip, call point of order, and I will address your question. I also want to emphasize that the Board of Health and the Health Director have participated in the planning and setup of today's meeting, along with myself, the Board of Selectmen, the Town Clerk, and many others. They have indicated to me that we have met or exceeded all of the COVID-19 safety guidelines for meetings of this type, and if anyone has a question about it, you can bring it to my attention, and I'll help you get your question answered. And I do want to mention, especially in light of the new regulations that went into effect last night, unless you feel it's impeding you when you're speaking at a microphone with one of these plexiglass shields in front of you, I'm going to ask that you leave your masks on at all times, only to take them off momentarily if you need to take a sip of a drink or to have something to eat. But we're trying to make this as safe as possible. I mentioned that we have multiple rooms. There's no roving microphone because of the 6-foot rule, so we have these placed microphones. If anyone feels that they can't get to a microphone and has a question, get the attention of me or Mr. Gold or Ms. Blazejewski, and we will come have you tell the question to us and we'll relay it to the microphone. If you do rise to speak, I'll ask that you state your name and address so the clerk can record which of us is speaking. I'm going to ask that you clean and use the wipes at the microphones and sanitize them before and after you speak. For deliberations, as has been our custom recently, we're keeping speeches and presentations short. 2 minutes for speeches and hopefully 5, no more than 10 minutes for presentations that I've been told are on their way. Stay separated, keeps your masks on. Because it's going to be a big pain to load and unload the room, I'm not going to take a break. Obviously, if we go past noon and some of you feel the need, if you've brought a light snack or a drink, just do it carefully and quietly. If you need to leave, please tell the check-in people when you're leaving that you're leaving, and you'll have to check in when you come back, if you come back. There are bathrooms right outside here. The scouts in the hall can show you where they are. They're marked off, also being physically distant. And the custodial staff has tried to keep them as clean as possible. If you see an issue with the restrooms, please contact a custodian toward the back of the gymnasium here, and we'll help you out. Again, if you have any question about the procedure at any point, you may say point of order loud enough to get my attention. Then please stand if you can and raise your voting slip, and I'll recognize you and we'll deal with it. I'll ask you to turn off or mute all your cell phones. And if you need to answer or place a call, please quietly make your way out to a common area and do so as quietly as you can. If there's a fire or an emergency, again, try to keep physically distant, but fire emergency, sort of a bit of a gray area. Look around for where the exits are, follow the school staff if you see anyone, and just if that happens, we'll leave the building as soon as we can. Also want to mention thanks to the schools for pulling this off when there are SATs. I don't know how many of you drove up thinking there's going to be a big crowd here, but there's SAT tests being administered elsewhere in the building. So hopefully we're not disturbing them and they're not disturbing us. Don't know of any other procedural questions here at the top. So let's begin. Article 1, prior year's bills from the Board of Health. Do we have a motion from Mr. Walsh or from someone on the Board of Health? Mr. Edinburgh's here. Mr. Edinburgh.
Alan Edinburgh, 8 Nash Street. I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $1,080 for the purpose stated in the article as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Edinburgh. Brief remarks? Mr. Bakari.
Thank you. Steve Bakari, Health Director. So these are bills for electronic recycling that occurs at the transfer station. They were for May and June of fiscal year 2020. I did not get the bills until August, so we're in fiscal year 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Bakari. Mr. Masharelli, if you could just increase the volume of the monitors down here, just so it's a little clearer, that'd be great. While he does that, any questions from the audience here? Again, this is a prior year's bill for the Board of Health. Mr. Gold, any questions from the auditorium? Hang on, just gotta make sure we get the microphone on in the auditorium.
No, Mr. Moderator. Again, my auditorium.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Seeing no questions, this is an unusual case since it's a prior year's unpaid bill. It's a 9/10 vote, so let's not tax the math too much, but I will ask everyone who's in favor of Mr. Bakari's motion to raise their voting slip. Okay, please put them down. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, it's unanimous here in the Fisher Gym. Mr. Gold?
Unanimous.
Unanimous. The motion carries. Thank you. Let me just write this down. We now turn our attention to Article number 2, having to do with fiscal year 2021 operating budget adjustments by the Board of Selectmen. While Ms. Marshall approaches, I'll let people, just as a reminder, if you were here in June, you know that because the economic times were quite uncertain in June, we passed over and we presented minimal budgets, and this article is essentially now just sort of making some requested adjustments. With that said, Ms. Marshall.
Shelby Marshall, 7 Charles Street. Mr. Moderator, I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the following sums of money. $56,750 for the purpose of increasing the fire department's salary and wages to fund the fire department union contracts. $59,195 for the purpose of increasing the school department budget to fund labor contracts. $36,500 for the purpose of increasing the economic development salary and wages to fund the economic development coordinator position. $15,032 for the purpose of increasing the Department of Public Works salary and wages to fund a DPW laborer position. $37,200 for the purpose of increasing the police department's salary and wages to fund one additional police position. $30,000 for the purpose of increasing the legal services budget. $8,000 for the purpose of increasing the town's buildings and grounds expenses. And further, to transfer the sum of $51,320 from the water enterprise salary and wages to the water enterprise expense, and to transfer a sum of $8,000 from the election and registration expenses to election and registration salary and wages. Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Did you have a presentation? or-
Actually, our town manager will take it from here.
Okay. Ms. Williams.
Good morning. My name is Christy Williams, and I'm your town manager. In talking about the FY 2021 budget, I just wanted to mention that how we closed out FY 2020. When I came before you in June, we talked about the fact that we had estimated a $700,000 shortfall in local receipts for FY 20. This was largely due to projected decreases in local receipts related to meals tax, hotel motel tax, related to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The good news is that we actually received $1.5 million over our estimated shortfall. So we came in well over what was anticipated. Additionally, in June, I told you about several measures we were taking to limit spending in the FY 2020 budget to be prepared for any impacts of COVID-19. And so based on all the things that all of the departments did, the FY 2020 budgets, we had turnbacks of $1.35 million, and we were able to close out articles to the amount of $750,000. So we did end fiscal 20 in a good financial position despite the impacts of the pandemic. So we had come forward with FY 2021 budget in June, and at the time we were anticipating a state aid reduction of almost 1.4 million and a shortfall in FY 2021 of 1.8 million. And if we had done nothing at that time, we were estimating that the impact to the average single-family tax bill would have been $864. Due to the budget reductions that we made in FY 2021 and some of the deferrals that we did related to free cash, retained earnings, some of the articles, raise and appropriate and borrowing, we were able to defer or reduce $6.5 million, and we were able to bring the average single-family tax bill increase back to the $457 amount, which was what we were projecting prior to the pandemic. So that's the amount that we would have brought forward to you in March of 2020 had we had town meeting at the time. Since that time, we've received additional information, and obviously we've learned a lot more about the impacts of the pandemic. The state has committed to funding municipalities at FY 2020 levels, so the reductions that we had estimated, the shortfall in state aid that we had estimated did not come to fruition. And so we were able to put $1.2 million back into our FY 2021 budget. However, we do anticipate local receipts coming in at that same reduced amount of almost $2 million. So just to bring you in summary of where we were and where we are now, in FY 2020, the tax bill was $9,775 to the average single family. In March, we estimated that $457. In June, we made changes to bring it back to that $457. And currently, based on the state aid information, values, and how the receipts have come in, we're actually currently estimating that if we did nothing today, your increase would be $195 to the average single family. You do have two articles in front of you today that will impact your taxes. And so at the end of today, if everything passes, the average increase to the single family would be $226. The two articles that are before you that have an impact to the taxes is Article 2, which is the one that's before you right now, and Article 13. So as Selectman Marshall mentioned, there are several increases in Article 2 for different purposes. They all add up to an increase of $30 to the average single family, which is that $195 plus the $30. And then Article 13 is an additional $1 on the average single family. Also included in this article, as Selectman Marshall mentioned, is two transfers. So those transfers would not impact your taxes, but would just move money from one budget to another. This is just a slide that we show often that shows the history of our increase to the average single family. So you'll see that our estimated for 2021 is that $225 or $26. And then this just shows our tax bill in relation to our data dashboard communities. It's an FY 2020 comparison because we haven't set the tax rate, but you can see that Westborough falls in the middle of our data dashboard comparative communities. And then in looking at the total town reserves, you'll see that we are still financially strong. Our free cash is at 11.7%, stabilization at 3.3%. And then our combined free cash and stabilization, we're at 15.66% of our budget, which is actually over where our goal is in our comprehensive fiscal management policies. Understanding that we still have the March town meeting, which is where we typically spend a lot of free cash and related to capital items. And then this is just a summary of 2020 versus 2021. So our total budget increase that we're proposing, inclusive of the articles today, is just under a 2.5% increase with a $226 estimate to the average single family, and we've grown our excess levy capacity by 1.1 million. Then we always like to let you know that we work very hard to keep our vision of Westborough. I want to thank all the department heads, the town and school. We've all worked really hard through this COVID-19 pandemic to make sure that we're bringing you a very fiscally responsible budget for 21. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I think since this is very similar to the normal budget, I think the most effective way to handle this and to keep conversation focused is I'm not going to read the full motion, but I'm going to go sort of section by section and ask people who have questions to say question. Ben, to save us time with the give and take, I will ask you to hear if anything's questioned, and then after I've read them all, I'll confirm what I've heard questioned here in this room, and then I'll check with you to see if what's questioned in the other room. So we have an increase to the fire department salary and wages to fund fire department union contracts. Are there any questions on that? Hearing none. There was also a part of the motion was to increase the school department budget to fund labor contracts. Are there questions on that? Hearing none, there was also part of the motion to increase the economic development salary and wages to fund the economic development coordinator position. Any questions on that? Hearing none. Section on increasing Department of Public Works salary and wages to fund DPW labor position. Any questions? Hearing none. Increasing police department salary and wages to fund one additional police position. Any questions? Hearing none. Increasing the legal services budget. Any questions? Hearing none. Increasing town building and grounds expenses. Any questions? Hearing none. There was also a transfer from enterprise salary and wages to enterprise expense. Water enterprise salary and wages to water enterprise expense. Any questions? Hearing none. Transfer from election and registration expenses to election and registration salary and wages. Any questions? I hear no questions. Mr. Gold, were there any questions from the auditorium?
No questions.
No questions, and I believe, Ms. Blazewski, there are no voters in the overflow room at this point. So in that case, since I've heard no questions, we will then proceed to a vote. This action requires a majority vote. Will all those in favor please raise their voting slips? Thank you. All those opposed? I see none opposed. Any opposition in the auditorium, Mr. Gold?
No opposition.
Okay, the article passes. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. We now turn our attention to Article number 3, Country Club Operating Budget Adjustment. We have a motion from Mr. Buffard. Mr. Buffard. Name and address, please. Oh, wait a second. Let's get the Steve, front, Jim, audience microphone, please.
Test.
Thank you.
Test. Donald Bouffard, 19 K Street, member of the Country Club Operating Committee. I move that the town vote to transfer the sum of $64,694 from the Country Club retained earnings to the fiscal year 2021 Country Club operating salary and wages, and to transfer the sum of $26,015 from the Country Club retained earnings to the fiscal year 21 Country Club operating expenses for the purpose of restructuring the management of the golf course.
Thank you, Mr. Bouffard. Mr. Bouffard, brief presentation or explanation?
Summarizing the discussion in the warrant, the transfers referenced in Article 3 are to fund the golf shop operation for the remainder of the fiscal year starting January 1st, as we move from contracting for services to administration through the town recreation department. These expenses will be offset by revenue from operations, which formerly went to the contractor. Very briefly, this is the result of a 4-year-long process of review, analysis, and planning. The Country Club Operating Committee recommended to the Board of Selectmen that the golf course operation would be better managed through the town recreation department. Some specific points of consideration: changing demographics of golf, availability of contractors interested in managing 9-hole municipal golf courses, a better match between community needs and the golf course operation, and last but not least, increasing time demands on the all-volunteer CCOC. Just like to editorialize, there has been an unprecedented demand for golf. Our greens fees for fiscal year 20 were up 36% over the prior fiscal year, and that trend continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bouffard. Any questions on Mr. Bouffard's motion here in the gymnasium? Any questions from the auditorium?
No questions.
Hearing no questions, our action comes on Mr. Bouffard's motion to transfer the funds as are in the motion. As always, we will vote by raising our voting slips. Will all those in favor please raise their voting slips? Okay, please put them down. Anyone opposed? I see no opposition here in the gymnasium. Any opposition in the auditorium, Mr. Gold?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, that action is passed. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you, Mr. Bouffard. We now turn our attention to Article 4, dealing with rescinding borrowing. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ian Johnson, 9 Burtis Adams Way. I move the town vote to approve the article as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Brief remarks?
Sure. So this article will rescind borrowing authorizations previously approved by town meeting. This is a normal practice we do for rescinding those once either projects are done or projects are no longer needed. This will not reduce the tax rate, but will remove the borrowing authorization from the town's financial records, which again helps us with rating agencies when they look at outstanding authorized borrows. And the only way to remove borrowing authorization from the town's financial records is by a vote of the town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions here in the auditorium? In the gymnasium. Wow. Seeing none, any questions from the auditorium? Mr. Gold?
No.
Hearing no questions, our action comes on Mr. Johnson's motion to approve the article as printed in the warrant. All those in favor, please raise their voting slips. Thank you. Put them down. Anyone opposed? I see no opposition. Mr. Gold, any opposition from the auditorium?
No opposition.
In that case, it is a unanimous vote. The motion carries. We now turn our attention to Article 5, dealing with appropriation of the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund. Mr. Payant.
Good morning, Chris Payant, Director of Public Works. I move that the town vote to transfer from receipts reserves account the sum of $9,122.70 for the purpose stated in the article as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Payant. Any brief remarks?
The Commonwealth taxes anyone that uses a rideshare service like Uber, and some of that tax money is then returned to towns where those rides originated. So this is our portion of that tax, and it allows us to spend that money on, with your approval, it allows us to spend that money on road infrastructure improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Any questions here in the gymnasium? Seeing no questions, any questions from the auditorium?
No.
Seeing no questions, our action comes on Mr. Payne's motion. For all those in favor, please raise their voting slips. Okay, please put them down. Any opposed? I see no opposition here in the gymnasium. The auditorium, Mr. Gold?
No opposition.
In that case, the motion carries. It is unanimous. I'll also let you know that sometime shortly after we started, I got word from the town clerk and her staff that we are over 50 voters. So again, there was no quorum, but we do have more than 50 people here for anyone who's interested. And I'll thank each and every one of you for taking time out of one of the most glorious November weekend days ever, perhaps, to be here. We now move to Article 6, the Capital Improvement Plan. As with Article 2, Article 6, we passed over many of these items in June when things were less certain, and now many of these are back for our action. Mr. Hoshman.
Mr. Moderator, and I just want to echo what the moderator said. Thank you all for coming out in the midst of a pandemic, and this is truly impressive. So, Article 6, Capital Improvement Plan. I move that the town vote to transfer and appropriate from free cash the sum of $70,000 for the purposes stated in the warrant, Article 6A, as printed in the warrant. Transfer from free cash the sum of $10,000. Transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $10,000. And further transfer from water retained earnings the sum of $10,000 for the purpose stated in Article 6B as printed in the warrant. Transfer from free cash the sum of $80,000. Transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $80,000, and further transfer from water retained earnings the sum of $80,000 for purposes stated in Article C as printed in the warrant. Transfer from free cash the sum of $45,000. Transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $55,000, and further transfer from water retained earnings the sum of $55,000 for purposes stated in Article 6D as printed in the warrant. Mr. Moderator, would you like me to read through the entirety of them, or would it be just easier for me to stop at this point?
You want me to read the rest?
No, I'm happy to read. Can I keep going?
Oh, yeah, keep going, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, okay. Transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $35,000 for the purposes stated in Article 6E as printed in the warrant. Transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $60,000 for the purposes stated in Article 6F as printed in the warrant. Transfer from sewer retained earnings the sum of $40,000, and transfer from water retained earnings the sum of $40,000 for the purposes stated in Article 6G as printed in the warrant. Transfer from free cash the sum of $79,000 for the purposes stated in Article 6H as printed in the warrant. Transfer from free cash the sum of $155,000 for the purposes stated in Article 6I as printed in the warrant, and to further pass over Article 6J.
Thank you, Mr. Hoshmi. Any remarks?
Just brief comments, Mr. Moderator. The Capital Expenditure Planning Committee developed the capital plan last fall using a priority-based system of rating requests from all the departments. The projects were rated as they related to public safety, infrastructure needs, efficiency of services, legal requirements, public support, personnel impacts, service impacts, and administrative needs. All projects were rated from a scale of 0 to 5 for each of these criteria, and then were sorted by the highest priority to the lowest priority, and then funded consistent with the town's fiscal policies, in which the summary is to fund capital replacement at 1 to 1.5% of the operating budget. In June, departments were asked to consider deferring capital requests as mentioned to previously estimated financial uncertainty of COVID-19. Given the town's current reserve balance and the need to maintain the town's assets, we're proposing funding these projects at this time. The school department article is being passed over as they have identified an alternative funding source.
Just a moment. All right, thank you, Mr. Hoshmi. So I think the easiest way to do this is going to be to do it like the budget. So Mr. Hoshmi made the specific motions. I'm going to go down A through J to see if there's questions. Then we'll vote on all the ones there's no questions, and if there's questions, we'll focus the attention on that. All right, so with that said, your remarks are done, right? Sorry, all right. So were there any questions on 6A having to do with utility truck replacement? I hear none. Again, we'll do this the same way, Mr. Gold. I'll ask you for your report at the end. 6B, infrastructure data collection. I hear no questions. Article 6C, 10-wheel sander replacement. I hear no questions. Just shout out question if you have a question. 6D, backhoe replacement. 6E, generator replacement for the sewer pump station. 6F, sewer grinder. It's great to say those words here in a public meeting. 6G, F-350 utility truck with plow. 6H, command vehicle replacement. 6I, purchase of 3 police cruisers. 6J, parking lot curb maintenance repairs. That was a motion to pass over, and I'll take this opportunity to report that subsequent to this motion coming out, I believe the Selectmen and the Finance Committee both have voted to approve the recommendation to pass 6J over. Any questions on 6J? Any questions on any of the items in the auditorium, Mr. Gold?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Sorry, was there a question over here? Yes? Which did you have a question on? Thank you, Mr. Gold. Did you have a question on a specific item? You can. Wait a second. Mr. Masharelli, front audience microphone in the gym, please. Name, address, and what was your question on?
Yes, Andrew Kenigsberg, 3 Smith Street. Just wanted to know why 6J was passed over, parking lot and curbing repairs and maintenance.
All right, since that's the only question, I won't vote on the other ones. Does someone want to address why 6J, motion to pass over? Ms. Bach.
We found another source.
Hang on.
Yes.
Amber Bach, 10 Arch Street, Superintendent of Schools. We had a previous warrant article where we did repair work on the back parking lot area with Fryer Construction to do that drainage and curbing, and we had really strong savings because he's amazing. And so we'll continue with the savings remaining in that warrant article to do some curbing repair, and we'll hold on this one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, sorry. So that was, any other questions on anything to do with Article 6? I heard no other questions until the 6J. Hearing no other questions, our action comes on Article 6, A through J. Motion made by Mr. Hashmi. Will all those in favor of Mr. Hashmi's motion please raise their voting slip? Down, please. Any opposed? I see no opposition here in the gymnasium. Any opposition in the auditorium?
No opposition.
No opposition. Therefore, Mr. Hashmi's motion carries. It is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. We now turn our attention to Article 7, dealing with a greens mower request from the Country Club Operation Committee. I believe this motion will come from Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall, name, address, make your motion, please. Hang on, just wait till the mic gets piled up. Try again, please.
David Hall.
Thank you.
16 Old Colony Drive, also a member of the Country Club Operating Committee. I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $46,000 for the purpose of that is stated in this article printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any brief remarks?
Just briefly, this is a 2004 mower that is finally quit on us. We are unable to maintain it. We've been, for the past 3 years, kind of patching it together to keep it running. And it's just simply stopped. So we need to replace this.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any questions here in the gymnasium? Seeing none, any questions in the auditorium?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Okay. Hearing no questions, our action comes on Mr. Hall's motion. Will all those in favor please raise their voting slip? Okay. Any opposed? I see one opposed. We have one opposed here. Any opposition here?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, so therefore it is a majority vote. The motion carries. Hang on just a moment. Okay. Just a second. Some paperwork here. Our action comes now on Article 8, having to do with the golf cart lease term. This motion, do we have Ms. Welsh here? Ms. Welsh. And also a question about the motion we passed for Article 6 was for all A through J. We ended up not separating them. Ms. Welsh.
Yes, Katie Welch, 50 O'Neill Drive, member of the Golf Club Operating Committee. I move that the town vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a lease agreement for up to 5 years for the purpose stated in the article as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. Brief remarks?
Since the golf course will now be managed with a town employee, the town needs to enter into a lease agreement to have golf carts for use at the Westborough Golf Club. Initial bid request, we've realized that a 5-year lease would offer substantial savings to the town, and so this is why we wanted to put this article before the town today.
Thank you, Ms. Welch. So again, this isn't actually the lease, this is authorizing the selectmen to enter into up to a 5-year lease. Any questions here in the gymnasium? I see none. Any questions in the auditorium?
No, Mr. Moderator.
All right, our action comes on Ms. Welsh's motion. Hang on, just gonna make a note to myself. Will all those in favor please raise their voting slips? Okay, any opposed? I see no opposition here in the gymnasium. Any opposition in the auditorium?
No.
In that case, the motion passes. It is a unanimous vote. We now turn our attention to Article 9, Town Water and Sewer Improvements. Mr. Payne.
Good morning, Chris Payant, Director of Public Works. I move that the town vote to approve the sum of $1 million.
Can you just say appropriate, just for?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I move that the town vote to appropriate the sum of $1,980,000 for the design, construction, installation, upgrading, and/or replacement of water mains and all associated work for various roads and costs incidental or related thereto. And to meet this appropriation, the town treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum under MGL Chapter 44, Section 8, or any other enabling authority, and to issue bonds or notes of the town therefore. And any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the costs of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of costs approved by this vote in accordance with MGL Chapter 44, Section 20, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such costs by a like amount, and further, to authorize the Board of Selectmen and appropriate town officers to enter into all agreements and execute any and all instruments, and to take all related actions necessary or appropriate to effect the foregoing.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Any remarks?
So the town has over 100 miles of water main that are underneath our roads and across the town, and much of it is decades old, and so we need to have a program where we upgrade, and that has to happen routinely. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck where we have a lot of pipe that needs to be replaced, and it's going to cost us a whole lot of money at a single time. So this may seem like a lot of money, but we're trying to chip away at it in a timely or in a reasonable approach over the coming years, and so this is one step towards that. So you can see on the slide here just a description of where this site happens to be. This is what we anticipate the work to be done. It's along Flanders Road, and the site was selected based on the condition of the pipe in that location and a study that the town completed looking at all of our water infrastructure, and we have a prioritized list of where we need to do work, and this was the #1 priority recommended from that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. We'll switch things up and ask if there are any questions in the auditorium.
No, Mr. Moderator.
Shocking. Any questions here in the gymnasium? I see no questions. Our action comes on Mr. Payne's motion. Will all those in favor please raise their voting slip? Okay, thank you. Any opposed? I see none in opposition here in the gymnasium. Any opposition in the auditorium, Mr. Gold?
No opposition.
In that case, the motion carries. It is a unanimous vote, and that is more than the 2/3 required. We now turn our attention to Article 10, having to do with an affordable housing trust. Mr. Edinburgh.
Alan Edinburgh, 8 Nash Street. I move that the town vote to approve the article as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Edinburgh. Presentation, Mr. Edinburgh?
I do have a presentation, but I was wondering if the moderator, given the amount of community input we've received.
Okay. You want me to see if there's
process,
questions first?
See if the
Okay. Thank you.
attendees would like to see it.
All right, thank you. So we know this is it's a lengthy proposal. It's shown in the warrant. It's in the booklet in front of you. We know there's been significant community input through other means. Mr. Edinburgh is prepared and ready to give a presentation, but we'll first see if there are questions that people want to either want to see the presentation or if there's specific questions so he can focus on that in his presentation. Are there any questions on Mr. Edinburgh's motion here in the gymnasium? We have one from Mr. Koenigsberg, okay. Are there any questions in the auditorium?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Koenigsberg, would you like to ask your question or would you like to just hear the presentation and then ask? Can you go to the microphone, please? Just tell us what your question is, and then we'll figure out what, maybe we can figure out what the best way to proceed is.
The question I have is, will the presentation include what kind of housing or what your proposal is for the kind of affordable housing you envision coming out of this program?
So the presentation doesn't go specifically into the types of affordable housing. That would be a decision by the trust and really based on the circumstances and the opportunities that arise for the trust to get involved with. The trust, the working group has set 4 priorities for the trust. The first being working to ensure the town stays above the subsidized housing inventory threshold of 10% as required by Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, in order to prevent hostile developments where we can't control zoning. The second of those priorities is to expand the amount of affordable housing available for seniors age 62 plus. The third priority is to expand the access to and availability of workforce housing. And the fourth priority is to preserve existing affordable housing, keeping any from falling off the rolls of our subsidized housing inventory. And so those are the 4 key aspects of what the trust will focus on.
Okay.
Also, the presentation would show that any project that the trust would involve with goes through the normal planning process and is subject to our zoning bylaws, the process for site or special permit, design review, historical commission review, depending on location and the nature of the property. So all of the standard processes that give the town control over development.
Okay, my thought was if there was going to be any way of repurposing existing housing as something that they might consider as opposed to building new housing.
So many trusts and two programs that we highlight, that we look at are, in looking at best practices of housing trust, one is definitely repurposing existing housing stock. Housing trusts can buy property at market rate, make any necessary renovations, and sell it as affordable housing with the affordable deed restrictions. Housing authorities housing trusts have also converted surplus municipal buildings and even some commercial properties into affordable housing, oftentimes in partnership with private developers who are nonprofit agencies. Additionally, the trust is a financing mechanism. So for example, in Boston right now, in partnership with a nonprofit, the Mass Housing Partnership, that has a low interest mortgage program for affordable families, Boston is providing matching funds for down payments and is paying points to lower the interest rate, which effectively means a family eligible to buy an affordable home can actually afford a slightly more, about 25% more expensive home And so it makes more of the market rate available housing stock available to affordable families. So there's a wide range of activities that the trust can undertake that don't necessarily involve construction of new housing units.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kenningford. Perhaps if there are no other questions, I will suggest that Mr. Edinburgh, who is the Selectman representative to the Affordable Housing Committee, has a plethora of information online, and perhaps the presentation he would have given today could be placed online, and if it's not already, and word can be sent out to the town for people who want to see it. But if people would rather feel that they're ready to vote, we...
Hi, Mr. Moderator, we have a question from the auditorium.
Oh, question in the auditorium. Okay. Name, address, and question, please.
Steve Durrett, 23 Mill Road, Westborough, member of the Affordable Housing Trust. Just to reinforce the point that Alan made, and that is the entire process allows the town to stay above the 10% minimum affordable housing, and as a result of that, all development that may occur as a result of the affordable housing request would therefore go through all of the town boards as if they were a private developer. Which means that the town then, through its zoning and through its process, would receive whatever the town wishes rather than what the state would mandate. And that, I think, besides everything else that's an advantage of the trust, is the opportunity for the town to continue to control what we get and how we get it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Durrett. Okay, hang on. Mr. Gold, any other questions or comments from the auditorium?
I see none, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, Mrs. Allen. Also, if anybody thinks they need to see the presentation before we continue, but I think everybody's happy so far, so just let me know. Mrs. Allen, once you get the mic wiped off.
Chris Allen, 8 Edward Dunn Way. I have served on the Housing Partnership for more than 20 years and recently have completed my term. During that time, we worked with developers for the development of affordable housing under Chapter 40B so that the town will stay over that 10%. However, the Housing Partnership cannot initiate affordable housing, and it does not have anything to do with the financing. So as the town has grown and the homes have become bigger and the lots have become more expensive, we have not been able to satisfy the demand for housing for working families and other people who just cannot fund the purchase of one of the new houses in Westborough. But what this trust can do will enable us to have many, many options to develop affordable housing in different ways, to be able to purchase homes and rehab them, to be able to purchase land, I assume, and build affordable housing. What's particularly attractive is to be able to convert existing municipal buildings and other buildings that are empty into affordable housing. So the Affordable Housing Trust goes a long way to increase our housing for regular people, regular families who just cannot afford to live in this great town. And therefore, I think this is a fabulous initiative for the town to take. Many other towns and cities have it, and I strongly urge that you vote for it.
Thank you, Mrs. Allen. Any other remarks from here in the gymnasium? And I assume there are no more requests for remarks in the auditorium?
Correct.
If that's the case, our action comes on Mr. Edinburgh's motion to approve the article as printed in the warrant. All those in favor, please raise your voting slip. Okay. Any opposed? I see none in opposition. Report from the auditorium?
No opposition.
In that case, it passes. It is a unanimous vote. We now turn our attention to Article 11, dealing with funding the Affordable Housing Trust from the Del Webb Chauncey Lake variance. Mr. Edinburgh.
Alan Edinburgh, 8 Nash Street. I move that the town vote to transfer from free cash the sum of $642,857.15 to the Westborough Affordable Housing Trust for the purposes stated in Article 10 as printed in the warrant.
Mr. Edinburgh.
So this initial funding is the first of 14 payments from the Delway Chauncey Lake project per the Zoning Board of Appeals decision, granting them the zoning variance to remove units of affordable housing from the project. It's important to note that this is only one of 14. All future payments would go to the Delweb Chauncey Lake Stabilization Fund and would then require additional appropriation by town meeting at a future town meeting. So in Article 11, we're providing initial funding for the trust to allow the trust to start working and start identifying projects and start moving forward with affordable housing initiatives and programs.
Thank you, Mr. Edinburgh. Any questions from here in the gymnasium? Seeing no questions, any questions from the auditorium?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Hearing no questions, our action comes on Mr. Edinburgh's motion. All those in favor, please raise their voting slip. All right, any opposed? I see one in opposition. Any opposition in the auditorium?
No.
In that case, the motion carries. It is a majority vote. Thank you. Our action comes next on Article 12, dealing with the 50 Eli Whitney Street utility easement. We're going to switch things up and move the motion from the auditorium. Mr. Durrett.
Could you put the motion up, please?
Yeah. And could you name and address, please, Mr. Durrett?
Steve Durrett, 23 Mill Road. I move that the town vote to approve the article as printed in the warrant, amending, however, the word selectmen to selectmen.
Thank you, Mr. Durrett. Brief remarks, Mr. Durrett.
The fail school process included equipment that belongs to the utility that will run from the street underground to the transformer, which will be located on the property. And under current National Grid rules, that equipment must be owned by the utility, obviously for their liability, etc. And so in order for their equipment to be on town property, the town needs to provide an easement to the utility for that purpose. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Durrett. I guess we'll start. Any questions from the auditorium? No. Okay.
No, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Any questions from here in the gymnasium? I see no questions from the gymnasium. This action, like the borrowing before us, requires a 2/3 vote. So will all those in favor please raise their voting slips? All right. Any opposed? I see none in opposition here in the gymnasium. Any opposition in the auditorium?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, I declare a unanimous vote, obviously better than the 2/3 required. Mr. Durrett's motion carries. We now turn our attention to Article 13, dealing with amending the town's bylaws regarding the Community Development Department. Ms. Marshall.
Shelby Marshall, 7 Charles Street. I move that the town vote to approve the article as printed in the warrant.
Ms. Marshall, brief remarks?
Yes. This article will amend the general bylaws to create the Community Development Department, allowing the building commissioner to move into the director position while still performing the functions of the building commissioner. Similar to the finance department created a few years ago, this bylaw creates one supervisory position that oversees multiple departments. The Community Development Director will oversee the building department, Economic Development Director, Conservation Department. I believe that should be coordinator, not director. Correct, Christy? Director, sorry. Let me read that again. The Community Development Director will oversee the Building Department, Economic Development Director, and Conservation Department. The directors of these departments are currently supervised directly by the town manager. The staffing study completed earlier this year for all non-public safety departments recommended reducing the town manager's span of control, with the Community Development Director position reporting to the town manager. The staffing study further identified several benefits to creating the Community Development Department, including consolidating highly distributed development functions that are inextricably linked, creating clear structure for coordinating work, streamlining customer service, and creating a department more effective at handling large-scale developments. Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Any questions on Ms. Marshall's motion here in the gymnasium? We have two questions. Please address the question. Name, address.
Dunbeck, 8 Wayside Road, Westborough. When the staffing study was done, there was some discussion of including in this community development department and under the responsibility of the community development director, the responsibilities for sustainability and climate action. Is that the intent of this? And could we make it more explicit in the way the bylaw is expressed?
Ms. Williams.
So currently the bylaw only speaks to departments that we currently have, which is conservation, economic development, and building. We certainly have discussed the need for a sustainability coordinator or director with different options as far as potentially regionalization. Certainly if we develop additional positions, then they could be included in the bylaw. But this bylaw only speaks to positions we have at this time.
Okay, it does say include the functions, and so I'd like to make an amendment that says, is amended as follows. After economic development, I'd put a comma, say sustainability, comma, and climate action.
Can I just ask which paragraph you're in so I can find where you're putting
The very
this?
first sentence,
there shall be a community development department to include the functions. Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to include the functions and departments of the building, comma, economic development. You wanted to insert something?
Comma, sustainability, comma, climate change, and conservation.
Okay, hang on. All right, so Mr. Dunbeck is offering an amendment, so I'm just going to, we'll talk about it in a second. So Mr. Dunbeck is offering an amendment where the first sentence of section 1 would be a change to say there shall be a community development department, comma, to include the functions and departments of the building, comma, economic development, comma, sustainability, comma, climate change, comma, and conservation, comma, to be headed by, et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and now would you like to make a statement about why you're making that amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
The activities of sustainability within the community have already brought in $400,000 of incremental grant money to the town. Other towns have shown that by having active programs of driving sustainability and climate change, there is a payback of 5 to 8 times the amount you need to spend on this. I think it's important that this work become integrated into our bylaws and policies and procedures in a structured way, and I see this change as a positive step in that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbeck. I know that the selectmen are conferring. Well, there was we'll continue on. So anyway, Mr. Koenigsberg, while the selectmen confer, also if the Finance Committee wants to confer on that at any point to say if they want to take a position on the amendment, that's fine.
Andrew Koenigsberg, 3 Smith Street.
Yep.
As a longtime member of the Conservation Commission, there has been previously a large issue with conflict between the Building Department and the Conservation Commission way back when the tradition, I don't know if it was a member of the town bylaws, but the conservation officer of the town was the building department supervisor. We do not want to go back to a situation where the building department director has any influence over Conservation Commission activities, decisions by the Conservation Commission, who really acts as the supervisory authority for the Conservation Director. And I want to know if there is any anticipation that the building, that this new director will have any influence on the activities or the decisions made by the Conservation Commission, not only on permits, but there's several other responsibilities that the Conservation Commission has, and I'm greatly concerned about that.
Ms. Williams.
The Community Development Director would oversee the Conservation Director. Currently, the Conservation Director is not supervised by the Conservation Commission, but is supervised by the Town Manager. And so this would just be moving that supervision over to the Community Development Director. However, it does not have an, excuse me, it does not have an impact on the function of the Conservation Commission. The purpose of this is really to create efficiency, do a lot of sort of the work that they're already doing, where they're coming together to understand projects and making sure that they're all working together. And so it would not have any impact. It wouldn't change the relationship between the Conservation Commission and the Conservation Director.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, hang on, Mr. Bay. Eventually we're going to go back to the amendment, but I just want to get all the topics of questions out first. Are any questions from the auditorium?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, in that case, Mr. Bay.
Ed Bain, 5 Thomas Rice Drive. I think we really are talking to the amendment of, Mr. Dunbeck at this point, and which I support. I believe, as he stated, incorporating sustainability into, if you will, this one department, who department head would make sense. So I would recommend a yes vote, a positive vote on that amendment, and then we can take up the main motion, obviously.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. Oh, go ahead. Okay. Ms. Williams, did you want to address the amendment, or does anyone from the selectmen want to address the amendment, or? Because, so, yeah, why don't we do, so I think, right now, why don't we just take a brief moment. Now we'll focus on the amendment by Mr. Dunbeck. So,
Yes, so the selectmen have conferred, and we are in support of Mr. Dunbeck's amendment.
Okay, wait a second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
4-0, sorry.
Okay, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Hang on, we're going to wait to hear what the Finance Committee has to say, and then we can see if you need have more questions before you want to take a position, that'd be fine. We'll use this as a chance to, yeah, Mr. Silverberg, while they're conferring. Mr. Silverberg.
Hi, Mark Silverberg, 7 Weld Street, Chair of the Planning Board. The Planning Board met and voted 2-1 to not support the amendment as proposed today. I'd also like to report that we met earlier and voted 3-0 to support the original motion as made.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Silverberg. So the Planning Board voted 3-0 in favor of the original motion and voted 2-1 against supporting the amendment. Is that correct? All right. Now we're just going to wait to see if the Finance Committee has anything. So just give us a moment to see what the Finance Committee has to say again. So I'll start some of my, just while given time, I just want to, again, this is something I was going to say at the end, but we'll do it now. So when we're done with Article 14, wait a second, when we're done with Article 14, try to keep your physical distance and leave the building. Because of the new regulations, leave your masks on until you get to your car, please. And also, we don't do the round of applause now because we don't do applause, but I want to have you all, at least silently, as you leave, acknowledge all the work that went in by the schools and Westborough TV and Steve Ashley and his team to set this up. Obviously, we were ready for more people, and we've been very lucky, and thank you for, as always, for your civility and dignity through all these proceedings and difficult times. Mr. Allen, do you have some remarks? Mr. Allen.
Peter Allen, 8 Edward Dunn Way. Based on the previous speaker, I'd like to hear why the planning board is 2-1 opposed to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We'll have Mr. Silverberg summarize. You have remarks after that?
Mark Silverberg, 7 Weld Street. Well, the planning board was in favor of the sentiments behind the amendment. We felt that this article is an incremental change, and there will be future changes to community development, to the position, to the department, that will enable us to incorporate the sentiment that was expressed in this amendment, but in a more thoughtful manner, so that we can understand who is responsible for these functions within the new department that's being created. So while we're supportive of the sentiment, we felt that this was not the time to make this change and to give the town manager and the Board of Selectmen a chance to come up with an effective method to implement the sentiments of the climate and sustainability amendment that was proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Silverberg. I also have a report that the Finance Committee just conferred very briefly and voted 7-1 against the amendment. And Mr. Keogh, would you like to just summarize the Finance Committee's thought process? Thank you.
Sean Keogh, 5 Yorkshire Circle. Although we agree with his sentiment, sort of similar to what the planning board said, the process of changing a bylaw should go through review and really to determine what the, is there going to be a position associated with this and what the responsibilities are going to be. So we do like the sentiment, but we'd like to have further review and maybe something at annual town meeting. Thank you.
Okay. With that said, let's focus now our attention on the amendment. Are there other speakers who would like to speak about the amendment? Ms. Marshall.
Shelby Marshall, 7 Charles Street, and Chair of the Select Board. With all due respect to both the Planning Board and the FinCom, and appreciating that bylaws are serious changes, I hope that the community can appreciate the work that Mr. Dunbeck spoke to that has already been done by the Sustainable Westborough, and the amount of money that has already come into the town through their work and grants. So if you look at the bylaw, it specifically speaks to functions, and we feel that this inclusion of the language that has been proposed merely creates better connectivity to the town rather than having sort of a sustainable, if you will, volunteer group doing its amazing work, but effectively sort of being tangential to critical town functions. So that's why we are unanimously in support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Anyone else here? Yes, Mr. Hensley.
So Lester Hensley, 39 Arch Street. Notwithstanding the comments of Ms. Marshall, I'm struggling with with what this bylaw or this amendment confers in terms of authority and relationship between the soon-to-be Community Development Director and the currently volunteer status of the Sustainable Westborough Group. I absolutely agree with the sentiment. I do believe that our bylaws and actions of our town should begin to reflect the spirit and the intent of the amendment, and we should be seeing more and more of that, and the Board of Selectmen, the departments should be incorporating sustainability and climate change wherever possible. I'm just not sure this is the right time or place to do it. I do believe that there is a broader vision for this community development director and department as conferred in the staffing study, and that as and if the community appoints, hires, develops an official position around climate change and management, then it should be appropriate, it would be appropriate to incorporate it into an amendment to this bylaw in the future. So for that reason, I think, once again, while I absolutely agree with the spirit and intent, I will vote against the amendment, but for the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hensley. Any other discussion here in the gymnasium? Okay, any discussion in the auditorium, Mr. Gold?
No, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, in that case, our action first comes on Mr. Dunbeck's amendment. Then we will vote on the main motion, and we'll figure out from this first vote if it's amended or not. So Mr. Dunbeck has moved to insert in the first, I will read if the amendment passes, the first sentence of section 1 would say, there shall be a community development department to include the functions and departments of the building, economic development, sustainability, climate change, and conservation to be headed by and under the supervision of a community development director. And then the rest of it would be unchanged. So that's what we're voting on. We're voting on whether a positive vote is a vote in favor of that sentence with Mr. Dunbeck's extra words. A negative vote is to leave the first sentence unchanged. After we vote on the amendment, we'll vote on the main motion once we know whether it's been amended. Is everyone clear on that? Okay, with that said, all those in favor of Mr. Dunbeck's amendment to add those extra words, please raise their voting slip. All those opposed? Ooh, very close. You might actually have to count one. Tell you what, rather than take the time to appoint tellers, I think, Wendy, will you and I count in here? And then Mr. Gold, can you take a count on the amendment in the auditorium? So let's
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So first of all those in favor of Mr. Dunbeck's amendment, please just leave your slips up and Ms. Nicolai, Wendy, why don't we just have this side and then this again? That way there's two. There we go. Okay, all those opposed to the amendment? Mr. Gold, a report from the auditorium?
We were unanimously opposed, 4 opposed.
How many was that?
4.
Okay, here in the gym, we had a tie of 24 to 24. And in the auditorium, we had 0 to 4 against. So the vote is 24 in favor and 28 opposed. The amendment is defeated. Our action now comes on the unamended main motion of Article 13, which is the approve as printed, so without the changes. I feel that there's no discussion that we haven't had already, so I'm going to go ahead and call a vote. So all those in favor of the main unamended motion, please raise their voting slips. Thank you. All those opposed, or any opposed? I assume you took that down? Yeah, those are, okay. I see no opposition here in the gymnasium. Mr. Gold?
No opposition.
Okay, in that case, although the amendment was defeated, By a slim margin, the motion on the action on the main motion was a unanimous vote. The motion carries as unamended. We now turn our attention to Article 14, having to do with the Community Development Director's salary. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Ian Johnson, 9 Burgess Adams Way. Mr. Moderator, at the conclusion of this, can I just have one word, would you mind?
After the vote?
After the vote, yeah.
Okay, yes, so before you leave.
Since this is the last.
Yes, after the vote, please don't leave, because I want you to leave slowly and methodically anyway, but I'll have some closing remarks, and Mr. Johnson will have some remarks. So,
I move that the town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $5,500 for the purpose stated in the article as printed in the warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Brief remarks?
Yep, very brief. This article will increase the building department's salary wages budget in order to elevate the building commissioner to the community development director position that we just voted on. And as the town manager stated earlier, the estimated impact on the fiscal year 2021 average single-family tax bill is $1 by this raise and appropriate change.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any discussion on Mr. Johnson's motion? I see none. Any discussion from the auditorium, Mr. Gold?
No discussion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gold. In that case, our action comes on Mr. Johnson's motion to raise and appropriate $5,500. All those in favor, please raise your voting slip. Thank you. Any opposed? I see none in opposition. Here in the gymnasium, report from the auditorium?
No opposition.
In that case, the Mr. Johnson's motion carries unanimous vote. I will, before we close up, I'll acknowledge Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In regards to your comments earlier about the thank you to the schools and the custodian staff and the work done here, just also wanted to say a huge thank you. I wish we could give a huge round of applause to the town clerk, assistant town clerk, that office, and all the volunteers for all the work that was done to have a safe and effective election over the early voting, the mail-in voting, record number of voters, which is phenomenal. As we know, the country is still counting, but the work done by by the staff here and the volunteers was just unbelievable. The hours put in, the number of volunteers recruited. So I just wanted to say thank you. The town, I know, really appreciates all the work that is done by that office in making the elections effective. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you. Thank you. We'll break with tradition and allow a round of applause for all the volunteers and the paid staff. All right. So thank you. So again, was so focused on this meeting that I neglected to mention Wendy and her staff. So thank them all for doing not only what they did for the regular election part, but the town meeting part. And now, a motion.
Yep, the chairman gave it since I was up here that I move that we dissolve the November 7th, 2020 special town meeting.
We have a motion from Mr. Johnson, having worked through the warrant, all 14 articles, to dissolve this special town meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, your action requires a vote in favor. Please raise your voting slips. All those in favor? Okay, any opposed? I declare the special town meeting of November 7th, 2020 dissolved. Please keep your distance, stay safe, and thanks for keeping it classy, Westborough. Appreciate your support. Have a great rest of your day. Stay healthy, stay safe.